Tuck Bridge Institute there in New Hampshire. He is a junior and a political science major. Jack, take it away.
Presentation cue then? Yes. In a second, we'll hear from Jose, and then I'll do it.
Jack. I'm so excited. You know, like scoot up.
Alright, hey, thank you so much for that introduction. Hi everyone, like we said, my name is Jack Gallagher. I'm a political science major, and I'd like to open this presentation with a quote from philanthropist and best-selling author Richie Norton. Intentional living is the art of making our choices before others' choices make us. So this presentation is going to be about my DFE and how I spent this summer learning about intentionality. In order for me to talk about that, we all need to have a common understanding of what intentionality is. So really simply, it's a noun, and it means the fact of being deliberate or purposeful. What I learned about myself this summer while doing the Tuck Business Bridge program at Dartmouth was that I'm a very passionate person. I'm passionate about going to law school. I'm passionate about my community and integrating myself with the problems that are there. And I'm passionate at making deep connections with people who I believe can benefit me and who I believe are interesting. But what I also learned was that I'm not very intentional about what my goals are. Law school is an incredibly difficult thing to do. Integrating into a community is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And it requires that you are purposeful in your actions. So with that being said, let me talk to you a little bit about the program that I did. So the Tuck Business Bridge program is at Dartmouth's Graduate School of Business, Tuck. It's in Hanover, New Hampshire. It's about 3.5 weeks long. Officially, we do 8-hour days. I wake up every single morning at 7 and I'd be in class by 8. Unofficially, it was looking more like 12 because we would do 8 hours of classes, and then we'd have intensely, loosely structured group work following, doing case studies on the different things that we covered. So it was 8 to 8, sometimes later every single day for about a month. And yes, it was incredibly exhausting. So this picture is the building that I lived in. It's dual architecture. Dartmouth's a very interesting college in that the top floor is where I lived, and you can't see it because underground there are a series of tunnels where I hosted my classes. So every single day I was in this building for basically the entirety of it. So that quote at the top is how Tuck Business Bridge describes itself. It's uniquely immersive and collaborative. So what the program actually is it's essentially what the first year of an MBA degree would look like. I would spend every day going and taking classes on things like economics and accounting and different things that were applicable in the business world. Now you might be asking yourself, why was a prospective law student at an MBA program? So I'd like to take a step back for a moment and actually talk about my search and the different internships that I was interested in. So this search. Now this is somewhat in chronological order as the pictures are introduced. That's something to keep in mind. So naturally, if I'm interested in law, it would make sense that I was looking for law-related internships. I had also heard about the Shepherd Higher Learning Consortium on Poverty, which is a group that deals with ultimately educating people about the different disadvantages impoverished people face, and to an extent it combats that issue, at least with education to the extent that it can. I'm also from the great state of Vermont, so naturally I would need to work with Bernie Sanders at some point in my life. That just makes sense. I'm also a political science major, and of course I'm interested in it for that reason. And then lastly, at an EPG all-hands dinner, very similar to what you're doing right now, I heard the story about a very successful student who went to this program and leveraged the information in order to get a really fantastic position for themselves at a bank. So it seemed potentially like a good opportunity for me. So how did this search really go? So I wasn't actually being very intentional with my goal of law school. I wasn't proactive in looking for applications, and I went and I finally started talking to people in early December. I was told that the applications were due really soon, and that would mean I'd have to go to my professor and I'd have to say something like, hey, can you write me a 3-page recommendation in about a week? Would that be okay? Do you think you could do that? That's not the person that I am, so ultimately I completely missed out on law-related internships because the deadline just came, and it went. On the Shepherd Consortium on Poverty, I did get an interview and I was happy about that, but I feel like I really failed to intentionally utilize my network and the people that I know who are good at interviewing, and ultimately I went, I did the interview. I think I could have done better, and I think I could have practiced for it, so I didn't get accepted into that program. With Bernie Sanders, this one hurts me a lot. I drive by a second beach house every day. I really thought he'd just take me, but unfortunately, I wrote and submitted 3 essays for the program the night they were due. That makes me sound kind of bad, but in fairness, the idea of working for Bernie Sanders only occurred to me 2 days before the application closed. So I did a pretty quick turnaround. But then lastly, for Tuck Business Bridge, the reason I said this was chronological was actually because I got better every single time. From being a procrastinator who absolutely didn't get in any applications to not practicing for an interview, by the time I made it to Tuck, I was working with my classmates, I was working with people that I knew. I was like, hey, is this essay good or is this not good at all? And ultimately, I was really working with my professors in order to make sure I was the candidate that this program wanted to see. So this is a learning experience for me. So I kind of want to reflect on my search. What was the big issue for me? Action without intention. So one misconception I had about myself before I went through this summer was that, hey, I'm doing things. I do EPG, I do things like NAIL, which is a community involvement program, and I applied to go to Dartmouth, so obviously I'm doing things. What I learned is I was acting, but there was no intention, because if I want to go to law school, none of those 3 things are actually supporting me in getting there. They're developing me as a person and they're developing me in my passions, but I wasn't acting with the intentionality that I needed. I was also procrastinating. This is something that I saw with myself early on, and it's something I've worked really hard to change after this summer. I was doing things, I was doing them later than I should have. And I didn't ask for help. So initially, I was in a position where I really didn't want to bother people. I really didn't want to talk to those that I knew and ask them, hey, what should I do? I'm happy with myself after this summer because now I'm completely comfortable talking to people and saying, listen, I need to get into this program. I need your help because you're much better at this than me. So that's a little bit of a reflection on my search. So what changed? Because after all, I'm up here for a reason, and this is a story of success. How did I manage to become a more intentional person after the summer? So this is how. To give you a little, that's me, just in case you don't know. To give you a little demographic information about the Tuck program, it was me and 130 other students. Basically, what I learned was this. The program has people who have already completed their undergraduate, which means directly in my class, I was working with a 3rd-year pediatric surgeon side by side, answering questions on economics with him, very intimidating, and I was also working with an Israeli commando in military intelligence, also really quite intimidating. And what I learned, whenever you go to something new, one of the first questions that gets asked is, hey, what are you doing here? Like, why are you interested? Why did you end up at this program? And my answer was really bad compared to everybody else's, because my answer was, well, my best friend went to Dartmouth, and Dartmouth accepted me, and it was the only thing I got into, and it seemed like a good opportunity. I slapped the name on my resume, Ivy League, here I come, right? I was talking to these other people. I was talking to my classmates, and they would say things like, these are quotes, yeah, well, I started a small business and it's really blowing up. I have no idea how to do the books. I have no idea to get in contact with the people I need. And soon I'm worried I'm ultimately going to drown an opportunity because I just don't know what to do. Incredibly targeted. I was talking to people who wanted to be consultants. If you know anything about the consultancy business, you know that it's something like 1% of people who want to do that ultimately get in. It's as tough as being a lawyer, I would say, in the level of intentionality required just to get into that position. Those people found themselves at this program because you were directly put in a position where you were talking with people who were at firms like BlackRock and KPMG, which are some of the big consultancy firms. So I want to compare and contrast because unlike everybody else, I didn't go and do a DFE where I was in Switzerland and I was working on helping refugees. I did 2 academic programs back to back. So this provides me a good opportunity to do some sort of analysis. So this is a Venn diagram, compare and contrast. So I'm going to talk about this one a little, okay? Initially, this was incredibly important to me. Tuck is an Ivy League. Entrepreneurship from the public good is from Berea. It's a small liberal arts college. They just can't compete. I learned I couldn't have been more wrong. I took 1 class in entrepreneurship at Tuck Business Bridge, and what I learned is there may be multiple ways to teach people how to be entrepreneurs, but the content that you cover is going to be the same. For those of you who have been in EPG, I'll tell you that I covered topics like IDO, customer discovery, the milkshake example. I'll tell you, being in that class was a little bit like deja vu for me. I ultimately learned It's what you make of it, it's not where you are, and just going to Dartmouth wasn't enough for me to get any benefit out of it. It's what I did with the experience. Next, 3.5 weeks, no follow-up, versus 2 years and mentoring. So this is really incredibly important, ultimately, because with Tuck, I did it, I'm done. The only thing I have from that experience is the knowledge that I picked up and the connections that I made. Here at EPG, anytime I want, I call up Dr. Hackberg, and guess what? We're going to discuss my performance, and we're going to discuss how I can improve as a person. That's ultimately an invaluable experience for anybody who wants to improve themselves. Classroom focus versus case study focus. I wish I had a lot of pictures of you guys, and a lot of pictures of me doing stuff over the summer that I could show you, and it all looked really amazing. But like I said, I was in a classroom for 8 hours a day. So it'd probably be me asleep in front of my notebook. Just not exciting stuff. Versus case study focused. We read about Appalachia. We drive into Appalachia. We go to museums in Appalachia. So it's a little bit of a different interactive experience. Professional development versus personal and entrepreneurial. So this is really important. Tuck taught me how to do one thing very specifically, and that was how to integrate myself into the business community if that's where I want to go. Ultimately, it's a path that's open to me, but it's not what I'm interested in right now. EPG was about teaching a mindset, and that mindset was entrepreneurship. It's applicable everywhere. With that being said, the programs did share some similarities. Teamwork and communication. This one is huge. Just like in EPG, I was placed into a group of 4 people, and we worked on an incredibly difficult capstone project. So the capstone for Tuck Business Bridge looked like we picked a company, a publicly traded company, and we had to evaluate it, but based on a bunch of different metrics that we had to determine ourselves. And we did that in front of industry-leading experts and analysts who had graduated from Dartmouth. So this picture of Starbucks isn't random. That's the picture, that's the company that my team and I chose to evaluate for these different people. But I had an EPG advantage, and it really showed during the program. Firstly, engaging with complexity and uncertainty. So I just told you a little bit about how we had to evaluate the company. That is not a static thing to do. You have to make projections based on what is essentially just a guess with how you think the market is going. It's not easy, and ultimately, if you do a bad job at it, it will really show. I was incredibly fortunate, and EPG had already taught me how to look at communities and look at what those communities needed. That's applicable not just for communities, but for an international corporation like Starbucks. Next, mobilizing resources. So this one was incredibly important because I had to analyze Starbucks' entire supply chain, and I had to figure out, okay, realistically, how many companies can they open? How quickly can they get product everywhere? How quickly can they do X, Y, and Z? And I benefited from EPG because I already kind of had an understanding of looking at your community resources and looking at how you can prioritize them. It's the same skill set. And then lastly, facilitating group decisions. This one was incredibly important for me because when I did EPG, I was really fortunate to work with some fantastic people, and we were a really cohesive group that didn't run into many problems. I'm a little cocky because when I went to Dartmouth, I was like, okay, these are Ivy Leaguers, so obviously it's going to be the exact same. I couldn't have really been more wrong. It was actually a really rocky situation between my group and I. I found it was really hard to get everybody concentrated onto our goal, which was ultimately presenting a really fantastic capstone. But I thought back to when we did have conflict in my EPG group, and I realized that there were ways to fix that. So with these 3 incredible EPG skills that I had, ultimately, I saw it really pay off. My group was one of 30 groups that got a shout out by name. We were the only one at the closing luncheon for the program. I had the director of the program come up to me personally and thank me for the contribution that I did to my group's project. It was an incredibly validating moment for me. With that being said, this whole presentation is about how I learned to become a more intentional person. So what does that mean? My time with EPG gave me the skills to be successful anywhere. My time with Tuck has given me the intentionality so that I can go everywhere. With that being said, this is me freshman year. He's a passionate guy, all right? He's got a lot of different interests that he has and a lot of different routes he could go. This is Jack Gallagher now, all right? He's an intentional person, and he's going to go to law school with the lessons that he's learned. Thank you so much for being here. That was a lot, folks. Questions? Hi, what's up, Aziz?
Hey, so every time I would tell people I go to the only top school in the US with no tuition fees, people would be like, what? And so I want to hear, how did people react, or did you tell people about this? Because I think this is what we're known for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a really good question. It's funny because there are some schools that we rank higher than, people from those schools, I was interacting with them every day. And they'd be like, hey, where do you go to school? Most people would say things like, oh, I'm from Yale, I'm from Brown, I'm from Vassar, I'm from Middlebury. All really fantastic institutions. They'd ask me, I'd say, I'm from Berea College, and I'd get this blank stare, and it made me feel really stupid a lot of the time. But, like I said, that mindset is one that I ultimately think has been detrimental to me, because the quality of education that I've gotten here and the resources that I've gotten here, I don't care if people know what Berea College is, because ultimately I benefited from Berea College. It doesn't really matter. But I think that's a really good question. Thanks for the class. Yes?
So that Jack in the picture in the after,
After, yeah.
what would that Jack tell to the Jack in the before?
I love creative out-of-the-box questions. I think the conversation would definitely be around intentionality, and it would be, I kind of would need to convince myself that I wasn't doing as much as I thought I was. I was doing things. That was the mindset I had. If you had asked me before my freshman year, I'd be like, I'm involved with everything. Everything's going to work out. But that's not true. You have to be intentional about things. That's what I learned, and that's what I would tell me freshman year. Are there any other questions? Yes?
Does anything at TUC or in the summer internship you did help you with the long-term goal, which is becoming a lawyer?
I would say it helped me indirectly in the sense that being around that peer group really showed me I needed to kick it into gear for myself. I realized these people were doing something I wasn't. I wanted to emulate the success I was seeing them have in the business field. The actual skills that I learned, they were useful. I have some really great contacts. I'll say one thing I did was I totally revamped my LinkedIn. Hey, everyone reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want. I totally revamped it, and I'm looking into becoming a more professional person, ultimately for what I'm interested in. The classes themselves were informational, and it was fun. Yes?
So in regards to law school, what exact law would you like to do? What schools are you looking at?
That's a really great question. So I'm in the process of studying for the LSAT right now, and I don't want to throw out schools that having done it. I think that's really premature. But I will say my intentionality right now is I'm studying for that LSAT, y'all. I'm going to take it. I'm going to ace it. As for the law that I'm interested in doing, potentially being a prosecutor. That's a really hard one for me. I really do like issues of social justice. The different schools that I've been to, Cincinnati has a program where for people who were wrongly convicted, they work to free them. Something like that I think could be a really, soul cleansing. It's something that you could really feel good about. I don't know how else to put it. So maybe something with kind of a social justice component, helping people who've been wronged, something like that.
All right.
Oh, can I take one more or are we done?
Last question.
You can take one more.
Okay.
So I remember, and this is personal experience with your first year, I remember a lot of anxiety about going into law school.
Yeah.
So you would focus on your grades, focus on what you're studying, compare yourself to, to some imaginary law school student. How did this change after this program? Is it the same level of anxiousness about going into law school, or?
Yeah, so I really wish that I could say there's not one ideal law student. It's pretty cookie cutter, honestly. They have something that they're looking for. But I will say I'm less anxious about it now, and I feel more sure about myself as a person and what I need to do to accomplish those steps. I have a lot less future anxiety, which is something the sophomores and freshmen in the room might be experiencing. I feel more committed to the path that I've chosen for myself. But I keep my options open too. I think the TUC was a beneficial program. I'm just not interested in an MBA right now.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jack.
thank you so much.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break, this time for real.
Oh, 5 minutes. Oh my God, I need to go hug him.
Hey, why not? If you're interested, you're not busy, right? Okay, great. Are you interested in doing your program? Because they hired me to be a recruiter, and I'm forwarding.
Which, this?
Yeah, Dartmouth. You can do it post-grad. You can do it after undergrad. Like I said, I was.
I'm excited when my job is
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to I want to go.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I really enjoyed what you presented.
Thank you.
So thirsty.
so thirsty. My mouth is completely dry. Thank you. I just want to cry now. This has been my whole week. It's been preparing for this. Thank you so much. Yeah. That's Dr. Hacker's favorite picture, and that's why I put it up there. Thank you so much. Are you doing a DFB? Okay, very good. I'll be there. Hey, Brianna. Shaylee? Thank you. What? Thank you. You did? Great. That's what I wanted. Sometimes I'm worried I say things and the audience is like, I don't relate to that experience at all. Yeah. It's what I live for. It helps me Yes, right now it's my big thing. Maybe. It's kind of helpful to know my score first. I might take some gap years, but like, if I can get a good score now, it might. And plus, Berea is great, you know, because you give you the option to do that. What about this woman insulted? Okay, are we hooked up on LinkedIn? Because I know people who work for those firms now. I'm connected. I can do a referral. I feel like everyone's lying.